Explosions are being heard in the city center, Kiev. The Ukrainian president has gone on record to say they can hold on maximum for 96 hours, and after that, Ukraine will fall to Russia. This is a damning statement to be made by the head of state. But such is the state of affairs in Ukraine. There are Russian tanks that have rolled into several parts of Ukraine. It's a multi-pronged offensive undertaken from south, north and east. We will get to those details, but I want to begin this broadcast with 10 defining image. India Today's biggest team of producers have put together some of the most defining images that we are putting out on your television screen. And take a look at screen number one. Image number one, horrifying images of the Russia-Ukraine war emerging, shocking explosions on the streets of Kiev caught on camera. Russian artillery shells hits a civilian on a cycle on the streets of Ukraine. Ukraine, of course, has also claimed that Russia is now systematically targeting even civilian areas. After the attack on Ukraine's port city of Odessa, Russian military strength was on full display on the streets of Odessa. Look at these images, Russian tanks on the streets of Odessa, and this is an absolute show of strength at this point of time. The aftermath of the attacks on Ukraine's capital city Kiev paints a devastating picture. After heavy attacks early this morning, several residential buildings were also targeted, and they now lie in a shambles, burnt and dilapidated after repeated firing and shelling. And a very desperate Ukraine army has now tried its best to prevent Russian soldiers' advance into capital Kiev. They've even blown up a bridge near the capital Kiev in order to prevent the Russian army from crossing the Dnieper River. That just shows how close, and Dnieper flows right through Kiev, the cities on either side. This just shows how close the Russians are now to the capital city. Russian tanks also rolling into the iconic Chernobyl nuclear power plant that lies between Ukraine and Belarus border. And of course, the Ukrainian capital Kiev, Ukraine's president, his office has claimed this is a threat not just to Ukraine, but to entire Europe. He's seeking serious intervention, serious sanctions against Russia. Panic-stricken people in Ukraine are now taking shelter in bunkers, and where bunkers are not available, rushing into metro stations. India Today's Maria brings us a first-hand account of the situation on ground zero. And in Kiev, these are images of the wreckage of an aircraft. These visuals show an aircraft that crashed into a residential building in Kiev. There has been extensive damage to this building and to residents here. Anti-war protests have broken out in 51 cities across Russia. Police in Russia have so far detained 1,400 people who turned up against the Vladimir Putin government for waging war on Ukraine. Look at some of these images. Police mercilessly detaining and arresting protesters. Can these children understand conflict, understand the gravity of the Ukraine-Russia crisis? Just look at these images on your television screens. Parents, not just in Mariupol, but in several other parts, struggle to find words to explain to their children why are explosions happening and so frequently in and around Mariupol. So bad is the situation at this point of time that after this full-scale invasion, refugees have started fleeing Ukraine. People have started fleeing Ukraine to take refuge in neighboring countries, Slovakia and Hungary. As of now, Hungary has extended a temporary legal protection to Ukrainians fleeing the Russian invasion. and Rajesh Pawar, who joins us from Mariupol. But before I come to our team, Maria, I want to understand from you this news that is just breaking from the Russian media. Russian media says President Zelensky is seeking dialogue and negotiations with President Putin. What more can you tell us about what's happening diplomatically? What's the thinking in the mind of the Ukrainian government, Maria?
Yeah, right. There were these reports, and of course, Russia wants to show it as if Ukrainian army is weaker. No, that's not true. Ukrainian army stands still and now is defending the capital, Kiev, from the Russian army, from the armored vehicles which are trying to enter the city from the outskirts. There were 3 major battles in different parts of the city, primarily the outskirts of city, and all of them were repelled. And also Ukrainian army continues to fight back in other directions, not only in Kyiv but also in Chernobyl, also in Kharkiv. So there the situation is still tough, and also situation is tough in Kherson. So this call of Mr. Zelensky to start negotiations was primarily the first one call was to so-called Budapest Budapest ACE. So it's the countries, Bucharest ACE, the countries who can help Ukraine find a solution, find a peace, and be, so to say, mediators in these peace talks going around the war. So, and also I want to say that Ukrainian army is still defending on different parts of Ukraine in different cities, and Ukrainian army stands still. So here in Kyiv, these 3 attacks were repelled successfully, and the army continues to battle everything that is happening now with possible Russian aggression. So the Ukrainian army people are all over the streets.
Stay with me, Maria.
In Kyiv also. Yes. Okay. Okay.
Stay with me for a moment, Maria. Let's get the latest from Mariupol, and Rajesh Pawar joins me from there. Rajesh, what more are you picking up on ground? We just heard a shell go off a short while back, but an eerie calm since this morning in Mariupol. What's happening on the front lines? What are you picking up?
Gaurav, right now it's quiet, but last night there was a lot of firing, yesterday afternoon as well. A lot of Grad rockets were fired on a city called Brezhnia, just 10 kilometers from where we are standing right now in Mariupol. And there was some damage to civilian property. One car was burned. Apart from this, right now, this sector is calm, but south of it, be it in Odessa, be it in Kherson, from south of it right till Crimea, the Russian army is in action and is in control of most of the coast of Black Sea, Ukrainian coast of Black Sea. As far as Kyiv is concerned, my report suggests that there is calm in Kyiv right now. There is no military action taking place. But yes, people are in panic and they're fleeing in large numbers from the city. Action in Kyiv is about 25 kilometers north of it, between Chernobyl and Kyiv. That's where action is taking place right now. Gaurav.
Okay. Stay with me, Rajesh. Let me also bring in Jan Hussar for more. Jan, we saw those very, very horrifying images of a fighter jet or an aircraft that crashed into a building. The air battles appear to have been quite intense, with Ukraine claiming that they've 2 Su-27s have shot down 2 Su-30s of the Russian Air Force. What's the latest situation on ground at this point of time, Jan?
At this point of time, the situation is pretty calm. But as you've seen in the morning, there has been some civilian casualties in residential areas, and people are still fleeing from that part of eastern Kiev. And people are fleeing to outskirts of Kiev, to villages that are actually smaller and less of a target for the Russians that are coming. As it seems, they want to try to take Kiev, because there are rumors that there are fights going on with Ukrainian and Russian forces outside of Kiev, like on the city limits of Kiev, which is around 10 kilometers from the place where I am now. We are actually trying to find out and verify rumors of fighters in Kiev right now.
Okay, there is information that some of these special forces, Maria, of Russia, they appear to have fanned out in different parts of Kiev, and they are hunting, and there are snipers who are taking down vital assets, vital points. Is there merit in some of these reports that seem to be emerging from Russia, that right now the attempt of the Russian army is to take control of some vital assets, vital points, airfields? 14 airfields have been targeted, I believe, across Ukraine. Has this been confirmed?
Not
Okay, give
all
me a
of it.
moment as I try and reestablish this link at this point of time. Okay, go on, Jan. Yes, please answer, Jan. Go on, sir.
Yes, I mean all of them. I don't know if it's all of them confirmed, but most of them are confirmed. I'm actually right now in a part of Kiev which was supposed to be fighting like an hour ago, and there are still a lot of civilians with weapons here. And there were we've seen some Ukrainian armored personal carriers, the APCs, the armored carrier on the way here. So definitely something happened here, but we
APCs,
cannot verify
yes.
yet now what it was.
We should wait 10 or 20 minutes.
Back to you.
Fair enough. Rajesh, the bigger picture as far as thank you, as far as Ukraine is concerned, the way this multi-pronged offensive has taken place, does this indicate that a majority or most of the defenses of the Ukrainian forces have crumbled, or is this a ploy to draw the Russian forces in and then take the battle to the Russian camp?
Look, Gaurav, as we have reported in the last 3 to 4 days, what we have assessed, that probably it will be a multi-pronged attack from Belarus in the north, from the east, from Russian territory, and from south, from Crimea. This is exactly how it has fanned out. And I want to make a point about Kyiv. Kyiv doesn't have city defenses, like it is not a perimeter defense around Kyiv. There have been no attacks on Kyiv as such. The only thing which has happened is about 25 kilometers north of Kyiv, where some action has taken place. With regards to other places here, I would like to say that it is right now calm. There's no firing taking place, and it looks like Russia has taken it one notch up, and they are satisfied what they've done, and they've evoked response from Ukraine what they wanted. And one last point in this, when we are getting these images from the Ukrainian media or even from the government sources in Ukraine, we must take it with a pinch of salt, because this is also a part of propaganda warfare. They would try to show as much as possible that Russia is damaging civilian infrastructure, that there are civilian casualties, and that they have destroyed our APC. Mind you, one APC in an invasion of this scale is nothing. And this is what they're trying to show, just to keep the morale of their public and of their soldiers up. Gaurav.
That's a fair point you make there, Maria. Of course, bringing us ground realities from Kiev, people taking shelter either in metro stations or bomb shelters. Maria, a number of Indian students were hoping to come out of the Kiev University and get to the borders. Would that be likely, or does the situation look extremely precarious? What should students do? What are they being advised? Stay put where they are, or can they head to the Romanian or the Hungarian border? Because we are told Indian aircraft, Air India aircraft, would be landing in those countries to fly some of the Indians back.
Yes, so about the situation on the ground, now these past 2 hours, it has been kind of a relief here in the city center, because there are no sounds of bombing or explosions can be heard here. So that's the relief for these 2 hours, and people are trying also to have their walks, daily walks, just to be in shape, because sitting in bomb shelters doesn't really help the morale. The traffic in the streets, as you see, doesn't really exist now. The streets are empty. It is the situation in the center of Kyiv. No evacuation order was given so far by the Ukrainian state officials. And also I want to get back to the information you've talked previously about the possible diplomatic solutions. So what Mr. Zelensky, President Zelensky, is telling is he calls the foreign partners, international partners, to do whatever is possible to pressure the aggressor, to pressure Russia to stop military actions and to help Ukraine to defend this attack of Russia. So the first call was to the foreign partners, and only the second one was he saying that yes, if needed to establish peace, he is ready to sit at the table with Putin and discussing how this war could be stopped. So these are two major developments, and we see them also simultaneously with those attacks which are being repelled in Kyiv. Three major battles have been going on in different districts of Kyiv, not in the city center, but on the outskirts and residential areas. So that's the situation on the ground right now.
Maria, stay with me. Jan and Rajesh, stay with me as we continue to report the story from Kiev, from Mariupol and from different parts of Ukraine. We have a team of reporters fanned out across this place. But Kiev, as Maria, Rajesh and Jan were telling us, is a city virtually under siege. The Ukrainian army had to destroy one of the bridges on the Dnieper River in an effort to keep Russian tanks at bay. Is that an indication that the Russian tanks are virtually on the verge of entering the city? As Rajesh was telling us, there is no perimeter security around Kiev. These are battles that are taking place, and we are told APC to APC, tank to tank, and ATGMs, anti-tank guided missiles, are with the soldiers who are now trying to stall the advance of the Russian forces. We bring you this report of a city under siege.
Day 2 of Russia's invasion of Ukraine saw its air defense systems firing across Kiev's skyline. What looked like a residential building was on fire. Ukraine says the attacks were carried out by Russian cruise or ballistic missiles. After hours of early morning attack, this is what Kiev looked like after sunrise. India Today, the only channel reporting from ground zero, captured the devastating and haunting images.
This is the ground floor, let's say, or the first floor, and there was a guy inside. It's a sleeping room, this one, with a balcony, and there was a guy sleeping inside when the rocket landed here. And he's fine, but in a shock, but it happened when he was asleep. I cannot even imagine what it feels like to be sleeping and you wake up and this happens at your home.
Sirens sounded across Kiev as residents were told to seek refuge in air raid shelters.
People have been sitting here from 5 o'clock in the morning, right after these loud explosions have been heard in the city center. So not all of them really want to talk or show their faces because the situation now is really tense and everybody understands that the worst probably is yet to come.
Several residents were seen fleeing into bomb shelters, metros and subway stations, as the streets of Kiev remain deserted.
I'm almost in a bomb shelter. Therefore, in any minute, I can switch off. A few minutes ago, we've heard a heavy shelling, a heavy sound, kind of bombing. At 4 a.m. in the morning, there was attack over Kyiv, but our anti-aircraft system protected Kyiv citizens.
Meanwhile, Ukraine president confirmed that Kiev is under siege and that Russian forces have entered the city. He issued a stern warning that the Russian armed forces would seize Kiev within 96 hours, bringing a new iron curtain down on Europe.
They have declared me public enemy number 1 and my family enemy number 2. They want to destroy Ukraine politically by destroying the head of the state.
Across Ukraine, explosions were reported.
Viewers can hear this. This is Mariupol. You hear a series. Hear this sound. Hear this sound. This is Mariupol.
Russian tanks entered the port city of Odessa and wrested control of Chernobyl. With Gaurav Sawant in Mariupol, Maria Pysarenko and Jan Husar in Kiev, Bureau Report, India Today.
You've seen what's happening in Odessa in the south. You're seeing what's happening in Kharkiv in the east, Mariupol on the Donetsk axis. Let me also now get you what's happening in Chernobyl. This is the site of that nuclear disaster in 1986, and Russian tanks have now taken over this place. There was a fierce battle. Ukrainian president confirmed to the world that Russia is now in control of the Chernobyl power plant. What is also now being said in Ukraine that several staff members there are being held captive by the Russians. This has prompted hundreds to leave Chernobyl. We bring you a ground report.
"130 kilometers north of Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, lies Chernobyl, the site of the world's worst nuclear disaster ever. A faulty reactor led to an explosion in 1986 in what was then the Soviet Socialist Republic of Ukraine, an integral part of USSR. 36 years later, Russia is back in control of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant.
Sadly, I have to inform you that as of now, the Chernobyl zone, the so-called Chernobyl exclusion zone, and all the structures of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant are under the control of Russian armed groups.
According to reports from Ukraine, Russian special forces occupied the entire Chernobyl area that includes a 32-kilometer radius exclusion zone around the plant that is stuck in a time wrap, having been devoid of human life for 36 years since the explosion in 1986. Chernobyl, to the north of Ukraine, sits right at the border with neighboring Belarus. The Chernobyl radioactive zone is spread across both Ukraine and Belarus, and reports suggest that the special Russian forces stationed in Belarus are the ones who, invading Ukraine from the north, took control of Chernobyl. The government of Ukraine claims that the Russians are holding civilian staff hostage at the nuclear facility.
We are outraged by credible reports that Russian soldiers are currently holding the staff of the Chernobyl facilities hostage. This unlawful and dangerous hostage-taking, which could upend the routine civil service efforts required to maintain and protect the nuclear waste facilities, is obviously incredibly alarming and greatly concerning. We condemn it and we request their release.
The Chernobyl nuclear power plant had been completely decommissioned, and with no human habitation in its vicinity, it has largely been a spot of controlled tourist interest. An international team has been working at Chernobyl, collaborating on the construction of a 32,000-ton dome around the radioactive reactor. The threat of war meant that the work stopped about a week before the actual invasion began. The people who have reportedly been taken hostage would be the maintenance and monitoring staff left behind. With radiation levels still in the danger zone, it is well understood that there is no strategic military significance of the occupation of Chernobyl. Its only possible importance in this war may be the fact that Chernobyl lies on the road into Ukraine from Belarus, a staging point on the corridor that the invading Russian troops could be opening towards the river Dnieper and onwards to the capital, Kyiv.
And the offensive continues. Protests against the offensive have started, and not just in different parts of the country, but even in the heart of Russia. Protests have been reported from several cities, including Moscow and St. Petersburg. Anti-war protesters took to the streets to criticize the war on Ukraine. Protesters were saying they do not want war, they want peace, they want dialogue, they want a solution. More than 1,000 people have been taken into preventive custody in Moscow and in St. Petersburg, but similar protests have been reported from different parts of the world.
These terrifying pictures have shaken the world. The loss of freedom and trauma forced on Ukrainians has led to a global cry against Russia. While Vladimir Putin remains defiant on this aggressive invasion, many in his country don't share his disregard for their liberty. As Russian forces claimed one victory after another in Ukraine, Muscovites took to the streets with banners saying no to war. Chanting crowds gathered in their thousands in central Moscow to hold protests. The anti-war protests quickly spread to the city of St. Petersburg, the crowds swelling by the hour, holding President Putin accountable for the misery innocent Ukrainians are facing. Putin tried to quell the growing cry against his presidency by deploying the police. What followed was a brutal crackdown on citizens by the security forces. Thousands of protesters were detained across several cities of Russia, more than 1,000 in Moscow. Protesters gathered outside the Russian embassy in London. The chorus against Putin's war was picked up across many cities worldwide. Protesters gathered outside the Russian embassy in London. There were similar demonstrations in Paris, in Tokyo, Jerusalem, Sydney, and in multiple American cities from Los Angeles to New York. In democracies across the world, Ukraine is finding support in ordinary citizens. Bureau Report, India Today.
As protests continue, Russia continues to bash on regardless. Their aim is capture of Kiev and a regime change in Ukraine, demilitarizing the Ukrainian army. Will they succeed, or will there be another development taking place? We'll be reporting from ground zero, but that is all I have for you on this special broadcast coming to you from Mariupol in eastern Ukraine. Many thanks for watching. Coming up next is India Today's Shivarur with more on this big story.